10th, 2022, and we're going to go ahead. I do not have anything in terms of any announcements, but just wanted to welcome everybody and thank you everybody for the participation in our last meeting with the various other working groups. I thought that was enlightening to hear comments from others regarding different topics. So with that, I'll go ahead and just start off with introductions. Tate Galloway, Interim Deputy Director for the City of San Diego's Planning Department, and I will turn it over to John. I'll turn it over to you, and I'll let you just popcorn it on to everybody down the line. John Connolly.
Thanks, Tate. John Conley with the City of Vista Planning Department. I'll hand it over to who's next up here, Laura Black.
Good afternoon. Thanks, John. Laura Black, City of Chula Vista. Gosh, let me see. Where is my, sorry, oh, I know who's on here. So I'm going to pass it off to Jeff Murphy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jeff Murphy, City of Carlsbad. I guess I'm supposed to hand it off. Nikki, I see Nikki on the phone.
Hi, sorry. My name's Nikki Sanchetta. I'm a regional planner at Sandag, and we'll hand it off to, gosh, I'll hand it off to Megan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Megan Openshaw, Senior Planner with the City of Imperial Beach, and I'll hand it over to Raina.
Hey everyone, this is Raina, City of Imperial Beach. I'm an alternate for Megan Openshaw. Sorry, and I will hand it over to maybe Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer Gates, City of Encinitas Planning Manager, and I'll hand it off to Michael, who just came on.
Hi, good afternoon. Michael Coyne with the City of Santee, Department of Development Services. And I suppose I'll hand it off to Jeff Murphy.
Yep, I already introduced, so.
Oh, I apologize. Let's see.
How about Joe Faraci?
Joe Faraci with the City of San Marcos.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's Joe Faraci, Planning Department, City of San Marcos, and I will turn it over to Karen Brindley. Welcome, Karen.
Good afternoon, everybody. Karen Brindley with the City of Del Mar Planning and Community Development Department. It's great to be back in San Diego County. Let's see, who needs to go next? How about Timothy Briggs?
Good afternoon. My name is Timothy Briggs. I'm a regional planner, a rail planner with Sandag, and I'm here today to present an item a little bit later, an announcement. So looking forward to sharing that with you.
How about Dave DeFries?
Hey everyone, welcome back, Karen. Dave DeVries, City Planner for the City of Poway. Also Vice Chair of the Twig, at least for this meeting. Oh, I got on a little late, so I'm not sure who's
How about
are we missing you? Okay.
Joseph Lim.
Yes. I'm not sorry for joining late. As
introductions.
Joe Lim, City of Solana Beach.
Thank you. Keith Greer with Sandag.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, I'm Keith Greer. I'm a manager at Sandag in charge of our environmental programs, and I have an item later on your agenda regarding the new Sustainable Communities Working Group.
Great, thank you. Crystal with Sandag.
Good morning, everyone. Chris Ayala with Strategic Partnership Team here at Sandag.
Thank you. Sam Solis with Sandag.
Hi, everyone. Sam Solis here at Sandag, Regional Planner focused on housing.
And Nikki with Sandag.
I already introduced myself, so I think pass it over to Allison. I'm not sure if she's introduced herself yet.
Thank you.
Hi, Allison Wood, Senior Planner at Sandag. I think we have staff from the county, Tate, that haven't introduced themselves yet.
Rami.
Hi, everybody. Rami Tully, Deputy Director with Planning and Development Services at the County of San Diego. And I already agreed that I'll hand it to Rob, so I had a backup plan. Go ahead, Rob.
Thanks, Rami. That was an easy one. Rob Eford, Program Manager at Long Range Planning for the County of San Diego, alternate to Rami. And I will hand it off to Seth Lichny.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. Seth Lichny, City of San Diego, the alternate for Tate. And I will hand it, I think, to Sergio Madera.
Hi, I'm Sergio Madera. I'm the city planner with the City of Oceanside. This is my first meeting at the Twig, and I will hand it off to, I think Darlene Nacarndo is on here, who's our Deputy Director.
Welcome, Sergio. Why don't, in the meantime, we hand it off and we can come back around. Omar Flores with Caltrans.
Hi, good afternoon. Regional Transportation Grant Manager for District 11. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I apologize. I've lost place of who hasn't gone. If somebody hasn't gone, they want to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Sure. Adam Feinstone here, Interim Director of Community Development with City of Escondido.
Thanks, Adam.
Hello, everyone. Mary Balderama, Transit Planner from North County Transit District, and I'm an alternate for Katie Persons.
Great, thank you. Anyone else who has not done introductions? Going once, going twice, all right.
Looks like we have Darlene from the City of Oceanside, whose audio might not be working.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry about that. I was just gonna be stealth and just be an attendee, but hi everyone. My name is Darlene Nicondro. I'm the Deputy Director of Development Services here at the City of Oceanside. Thanks.
Yeah, you don't get that luxury. Everybody's gotta come to the table virtually here. But thank you, welcome. I'm gonna assume that's everybody, and if somebody comes late or hasn't spoken, just chime in and introduce yourself, please. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 2, non-agenda public comments or communications from members or staff. Are there anybody from the public who has non-agenda public comments?
I
I'm
don't
seeing
see
Allison saying no. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. And if there is somebody later on, we can certainly put that at the end of the agenda. Any communications from members or comments? You want to go ahead and raise your hand or just get to the microphone? I do see a hand.
Hi, is this a good time, Allison?
Yeah, we're just seeing if Twig members had any comments, but I don't see any hands raised. So Tate, it's okay to do a couple Sandag announcements.
Perfect.
Okay, so thank you, Tate. Appreciate being familiar with everybody here in the room before kicking off my comments. I'll reintroduce myself for those that may have joined late. My name is Tim Briggs. I am a rail planner with Sandag. And I am the project manager for a new grant, a regional infrastructure accelerator grant through the Build America Bureau for projects within the Lausanne and Sprinter corridors. And as part of our grant, we are hosting an in-person public-private partnership or P3 workshop in April. The dates are April 19th to the 21st. And myself or someone from my team is going to be reaching out to y'all to ask for a representative to attend the training. The grant is supporting an assessment of a pipeline of projects in the Sprinter corridor and in the Lausanne corridor. So we've held space for our organizations or jurisdictions within those corridors if there's a station there, which is a good amount of this group. So Allison suggested that I come here ahead of my email to kind of give you a heads up, as well as to answer any questions. The workshop is 2 days, and there's a third day that's sort of an optional modeling exercise. It's going to cover overview of P3, successful P3 practices, and different kind of analysis for P3. And we're really hoping that this is a way to kind of initiate further collaboration with Sandag around these projects in the rail corridor. So we know we have the Carlsbad Trench, Badaguillos Lagoon, some Sprinter capacity improvements that we're looking to fund. So yes, if you are represented, if you are with a city with a Sprinter or a coaster station, you'll be contacted and a place to save for you. If you're not, but you want to attend, I'll put my contact information in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me. We do have a capacity of 40 people in the workshop, and there are organizations and entities that we need to invite to fulfill the obligations of the grant. But feel free to reach out to me, and if we do have space available, I'll be sure to send an invitation. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm going to turn to staff since this isn't on the agenda, if we can ask questions or spend too much, but maybe I'll just briefly run that risk and just ask, is this now more for rail improvements like double tracking, trenching, grade separation, or is this also related to any funding for transit-oriented development?
Yeah, great question. TOD would be an option that could be explored through P3 and through this further on through the grant. So if that's something that you or someone from your jurisdiction is interested in learning more about, then this P3 training might be a great opportunity. It's being hosted by our partners, which is the Build America Bureau and the FHWA. And so we have some folks from DC that are going to be joining us, and they'll be giving the training. I assume that the invitation is going to go out shortly. I'm assuming the agenda will go along with that, so you'll get an idea of what sort of topics are being covered.
Great. Any clarifying questions from members? Not seeing anything. Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to seeing a few folks in April.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments from members or staff before we move on to our next agenda item?
Yeah, just real briefly, Tate, I wanted to let the members know that the materials and the recording from the working group forum that we had a couple weeks ago on the REAP 2.0 program, those have all been posted on our website now. So we'll get links out to those. And you'll notice that we didn't have a quorum of the technical working group at that meeting, so we won't be approving minutes from it, but we will, we still want to make those resources available. There was a lot of good conversation that took place.
Agreed. Thanks everybody for participating, and certainly encourage others to take a look at the minutes from comments made, especially from I forget the name of the working group that was addressing more of disadvantaged communities, but there were some really good comments made. Okay, let's move on to item number 4. These are reports for the Regional Digital Equity Strategy Action Plan, and this is part of a early action. With that, Sandag staff will be presenting Crystal Ayala.
Real quickly, Tate, if we can approve the minutes from our January meeting.
Oh,
and then
sorry.
we can go to that one.
I heard no minutes and I just went right ahead.
Sorry about that.
Let's go ahead and backtrack here to item 3, approval of the meeting minutes. If this is for the January 13th, 2020 meeting minutes, if I could have somebody make a motion and then a second to approve that.
This is John Conley from Vista. I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Can I get a second? Thanks, John.
This is Megan Openshaw from the city of Imperial Beach. I second it.
So we have a first and a second. Can I go ahead and Allison, do you want a show of hands or do you want to do a verbal roll call?
I'll do the verbal roll call quickly here.
Great.
So for the city of Carlsbad, Jeff Murphy.
Aye.
City of Chula Vista, Laura Black.
Aye.
City of Coronado, I believe is absent. Okay. County of San Diego, Rami Tale.
Aye.
There he is. Okay, thank you. City of Del Mar, Karen Brinley. Karen's still here. Okay, I'll come.
I'm abstaining.
There she is. Okay, thank you, Karen. City of El Cajon, I believe is absent. Confirming that. City of Encinitas, Jennifer Gates.
Aye.
Thank you. City of Escondido, Adam Feinstone.
Aye.
The City of Imperial Beach, Megan Openshaw.
Aye.
City of La Mesa is absent. City of Lemon Grove is absent. And City of National City, it's like Martin Reeder.
Aye.
Thank you. City of Oceanside, Sergio Madera.
Abstain.
Thank you. For the City of Poway, Dave DeVries.
Aye.
For the City of San Diego, Tate Galway.
Aye.
For the City of San Marcos, Joe Faraci.
Aye.
For the City of Santee, Michael Coyne.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Joseph Lim.
Solana Beach, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Vista, John Conley.
Aye.
Thank you. So that passes with those members voting yes and those abstentions.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, let's go back to item 4. This is a report, the Regional Digital Equity Strategy Action Plan. Crystal from Sandag is going to be giving that report. It's all yours, Crystal.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Allison, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone. Funny how you're working on a digital equity project and you experience technology issues yourself. But I'm really happy to be here. My name is Crystal Ayala, and I'm part of the strategic partnerships team here. And I'm going to be sharing an update on an effort that we kicked off a little bit over a year ago, and that's the development of our regional digital equity strategy and action plan. So I'll start with a quick overview of the digital divide, what it is and how it's impacting our communities, why we're involved in this work, our strategy for addressing the digital divide, and some early actions we have underway to implement some key components of the action plan. Now, I don't think I need to spend too much time reiterating the significance of this work. I think many of us in our personal and our work lives can attest to the importance of internet and technology. It's just an essential part of modern society, provides opportunities and access to jobs, education, health, government services, the list goes on and on. And so our work in this space was really brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, which really shined a light on those who were able to seamlessly transition into a virtual remote world and those who didn't have the benefit of doing so well. So we were involved in the digital divide effort a little bit over a year ago. And in terms of beyond, just equity and the importance of digital equity for our daily lives, it's also a really important part of the transportation landscape. Today, we rely on this technology to monitor the transportation system, right? Have access to trip planning tools, booking a ride-hailing vehicle or a bike share vehicle relies on access to technology and connectivity. And in the future, we're going to rely on that just even more. Connected and autonomous vehicles won't work without this technology. Smart cities don't come to fruition without access to this infrastructure and to technology. So it's no longer an optional amenity, but it's going to be a critical component of our transportation projects moving forward. And as a regional planning agency and as cities, we all have a really important role in building out the infrastructure to support our transportation system, smart city initiatives, sustainability and mobility goals as well. I'm going to be speaking about broadband infrastructure needs and our strategy in just a few minutes. So I just want to spend some time walking through the broadband landscape. So this diagram here shows how a broadband network is laid out. First, we have a fiber optic backbone, and you can think of this like a major interstate or Amtrak that crosses the entire country. Then we have the middle mile fiber network, and that brings that backbone into the internet service provider's distribution hub. So that creates those regional connections, much like our state routes or our LoSAN corridor does. And then there's that last mile, which very similar to transit can be connected by a variety of ways. Satellite, wireless, fiber, all of these technologies bring that connection from the distribution hub to our homes and to our businesses. So how did we get involved in the space? I mentioned that our involvement in this really was at the outcome of the COVID-19 pandemic, when the governor issued Executive Order 7320, and that directed various state agencies to take specific actions to expand high-speed broadband statewide. So we took action in our region as well around that time. Last January, went to the board of directors. We asked them to adopt a resolution committing to close the digital divide. We formed a digital divide task force that consists of public and private stakeholders. Many of your staff sit on that task force, as well as education institutions, community-based organizations, internet service providers as well sit on this task force. And we're really instrumental in developing a regional strategy that addresses the entirety of the digital divide. We've also been working with our partners throughout Southern California to ensure that we are collectively coordinating and working together on developing consistent digital equity policy and planning. So we've been doing that closely with our sister MPO, SCAG, up north. And as we were developing our own regional strategy, understanding the digital divide in the region, around the same time, the state and the federal government passed some really monumental bills that are going to bring billions of dollars to broadband and expand this infrastructure statewide. So I'll talk about what we're doing just a minute, what we're doing to get us ready for that funding. But I just want to highlight that this work is really going to require the region collectively to have a strong and unified voice to really maximize the amount of funding that comes to the region. So all of this work last year culminated in the unanimous adoption of our Digital Equity Action Plan by the Board of Directors last December. And so I'll talk about our strategy for addressing broadband issues and disparities. But first, I want to set the stage of what the digital divide looks like for many of our communities. We spent many months last year conducting a broadband gap analysis, collecting data, analyzing data to understand the disparities in the region. And this took a little bit longer than expected because accurate and reliable data just simply isn't available. It's held very closely by internet service providers. But nonetheless, this slide really shows a really clear picture of some of the issues that we uncovered in our region. Many of our rural communities and our tribes don't have access to fixed broadband. Many of our households, especially those earning less than $50,000 per year, are impacted disproportionately by the digital divide. Seniors as well are also less likely to have a computer at home. And many of us saw firsthand what this looked like for many of our students who are struggling to stay connected and access online learning throughout the pandemic. This map here shows census blocks in our region that have access to fixed broadband service. This data is actually collected by the California Public Utilities Commission. It's based on data that is directly reported by the internet service providers. But a caveat that I want to highlight here is that if one single household in an entire census block, which we know has varying geographies, is served by an internet service provider, then the entire census block is deemed as served. So you can imagine that this leads to quite a bit of overestimating, overreporting broadband availability, when in reality, broadband services may actually be more limited than what this map illustrates. And just because service is available in your community, that doesn't mean that a household is going to subscribe to that service. Affordability and cost of service is a huge barrier to adoption. And so this map here shows some of the zip codes in the region that have the highest concentrations of low-income households that lack an internet subscription and a computer at home. So really low adoption in our rural areas, our tribal communities as well, but a lot of communities in the urbanized parts of the counties, communities like San Ysidro, National City, Logan Heights, City Heights also have really low adoption. Now, when we look at the cost of service, that really helps to better understand why adoption can vary and be so low in some parts of the county. In some areas, the lowest price plan for internet starts at $90 a month. And for a household with fixed income, you can only imagine that staying connected, getting connected is just completely unfeasible and unsustainable. As we look at the number of providers in the region, that really helps to put the access and the affordability issue in much clearer focus. Much of the region is served by 1 or 2 providers, which means that there's not a lot of competition, right? So prices are high and there's really no incentive to drive the prices of internet services much lower. And if you live in our rural and our tribal areas, then your options are even more limited than the rest of the county. Okay, so going back to that broadband diagram, I've talked about fiber being a key component of that fiber optic backbone and the middle mile network. Fiber today provides much of that underlying infrastructure that ultimately connects our homes and our businesses. The data on where fiber is located, privately owned fiber, is not publicly available. But with the help of the CPUC and Caltrans, we were able to identify census blocks where fiber is present. So that's what you're seeing here in dark blue. Now, that doesn't imply that the fiber is being used to provide service, that it's widely available throughout that census block, but it does help to paint a good picture where there's gaps in that backbone and that middle mile network. A lot of gaps in the rural areas, but there's some really clear and distinct holes in the urban parts of the county as well. Now, in addition to privately owned and managed fiber, many government agencies like yours have invested in fiber to connect your own public facilities, traffic signals. So what you're seeing here are where the transportation agencies in the region have developed a fiber ring. Now, this fiber ring right now is currently exclusively used for transportation purposes only, but public sector fiber like this one can be better utilized, especially in urban areas, to help increase service options, bring smaller ISPs to the table, and help lower the costs for many of our households. So making better use of public infrastructure is a really key strategy for us moving forward. And our regional strategy addresses this and so much more. We've developed 7 overarching strategies that tackle broadband access and adoption, tackling gaps in infrastructure, disparities in service, digital literacy, digital adoption as well. So you can see a glimpse of the 7 strategies on this slide here. And if you'd like to read more about our digital equity strategy, the various actions that we've outlined for each of these strategies, you can do so by visiting sandag.org/digital equity. And then we also have this really helpful interactive story map that goes through all of the maps and the data that I just quickly breeze through, and allows you to zoom into your community and get a better sense of what the digital divide looks like in your own jurisdictions. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about some of the early actions we have underway to help bridge the digital divide and build out the infrastructure that's going to not only support broadband, but it'll also support transportation, your smart city initiatives, and many other online services. Now, many of these actions are not actions that SANDAG can lead alone. It's going to require the partnership and collaboration with many of your organization. But we're really doing a lot of work now to build a framework for how we can expand the infrastructure, especially in areas where there are gaps. Now, one of the challenges that we uncovered during our research to deploying broadband is permitting. We interviewed many of your jurisdictions, we interviewed ISPs, and found that there are lots of challenges with broadband permitting. And so we are hoping to tackle streamline permitting head on by convening a group of representatives from each of your staff to tackle this issue. And we're hoping this will help address challenges around finding information online on broadband permitting practices and policies. We uncovered a lot of variation in the fees, timelines, requirements between jurisdictions, and overwhelmingly a lack of standards that can really delay the process. And so we are convening a regional digital infrastructure task force. We're calling this group Reddit to help tackle that streamlined permitting piece head on. This task force is going to be really instrumental in developing regional standards that can expedite this infrastructure, especially in areas where there are gaps, and will help us develop standards and templates around master encroachment permit processes, microtrenching standards, dig once, fiber sharing, to really ensure that we have a coordinated and a consistent approach to deploying this infrastructure. Many of your staff have responded to our invitation to participate in this task force. The charter and the work plan were included as an attachment to your staff report, as well as a list of the current membership. So we're asking that you please review the membership and let us know if we have the right representative from your city. Now that you have a better idea of what we're doing in this space, let us know if there's someone else that needs to be participating in this group. This work is going to be really crucial for the region, especially as funding becomes available, because we'll be able to demonstrate to the state and to the federal government that we're ready, that we're poised to expeditiously deploy this infrastructure and accomplish the objectives that the state and federal digital equity initiatives have embarked on. Now, one of the other items that this task force is going to be helping us with is implementation of a regional dig once policy. There's been a few state and federal directives around dig once recently. And so developing a regional policy would really align us with what's happening at the state and federal level to make better use of public infrastructure. So we're currently drafting a dig once policy that would require the installation of conduit and fiber as part of all SANDAG funded projects in areas where there are gaps. So as we're doing road work, as we're undergrounding utilities, as we're building out the managed lane networks, being proactive to install that conduit and lay the infrastructure so that we can make the better use of it when we'll need it in the future. And bundling this kind of infrastructure as part of these existing or planned projects really has the potential to realize a lot of time and cost savings. Some research we did pointed to upwards of 25 to 90% of cost savings, and will really help to lay the foundation for many of the smart city projects that we envision rolling out as part of the regional plan. Now, using a dig once approach is a really efficient and expeditious way to deploy the infrastructure. We're already using this approach on the state's first dig once demonstration on the State Route 67, which is laying conduit and fiber along an 18-mile stretch between Lakeside and Ramona. And with this project, we're actually able to save over $5 million by implementing fiber as part of a pavement project. So just an example of how we're already starting to do this and want to see this rolled out as a best practice for all transportation projects. Now, another strategy we can use for building out the infrastructure is by taking advantage of what's already out there by either licensing or leasing assets with either a public or a private entity. So we're already doing that as a transportation agency with MTS, NCTD, and Caltrans. And we've developed templates to assist you all with licensing your conduit or sharing your fiber with public and private agencies. So we hired a legal firm to help conduct best practices and develop these templates that can aid all of your cities as you embark on developing fiber sharing agreements or may want to pursue leasing some of the spare conduit that you may have within your own right of way. And this will help all of our agencies really maximize available public assets, help expedite the deployment of broadband services in the region, and also potentially has the added bonus of creating a revenue generating source for many of the agencies. So all of these templates are available through our Reddit task force, and I'm happy to share this with all of you after the fact, so you have access to all of these templates as well. And as I've been talking about infrastructure, I've been talking about these isolated strategies for expanding digital infrastructure. Dig once is one opportunity, fiber sharing is another opportunity, but to truly realize a vision of a connected region, we really need a comprehensive plan for how we can build out a regional network. And so we'll be bringing on a consultant in the next few months to develop a master plan that would construct a regional fiber network. And what this network would do would essentially connect all of our local jurisdictions in the region, allow all of you to support your transportation operations, and in turn, leverage that infrastructure to provide free, reliable internet in public areas, places like city halls, libraries, mobility hubs, to really ensure that we are maximizing the use of public infrastructure. And a key part of this is going to be inventorying what's out there today. So we're going to be embarking on an inventory, building a database of all digital infrastructure so that we really have a clear understanding of where there's opportunities and where there's gaps for connections for building out this regional fiber ring. And I just want to put this into context because our neighbors up north, the South Bay Cities Council of Governments, did something really similar, and they managed to connect and build a fiber ring that connects all of the 16 cities within their jurisdiction. There's a picture of that here on the bottom left. And by doing so, they were able to provide really high quality and more affordable internet to each of their member agencies. And they were actually able to cut their costs for internet by half, which is just a remarkable opportunity for us to consider as well. And lastly, I've been talking a lot about our infrastructure, but I just want to highlight an upcoming early action that we're rolling out to improve adoption, and that's our Get Connected campaign. This campaign will really help to raise awareness of several of the digital equity resources that exist in the county today. Internet subsidy programs, where you can access refurbished computers, information on digital literacy training. Many of your cities and libraries have Wi-Fi hotspots and laptops available. So really trying to get the information out to the community on what's available to them and how they can take advantage of a lot of these resources to get connected. So we'll be tapping into all of you, our community partners, libraries and schools, and we'll be developing a partner toolkit to help us spread word about all of these resources. And we'll also be doing some direct marketing to some of the communities that have the lowest adoption rates. So please keep an eye out for future correspondence from us around this Get Connected campaign. And let me know if you have any questions or would like to be involved with any of our current initiatives that I've just quickly breezed through. So that wraps up my presentation. We're keeping an update of all of these projects on our digital equity website, which you can find online. But if you have any questions about what I just shared, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Crystal. I actually just do quickly want to make a comment and a question. Certainly with COVID, I think the need for having internet access has become so much critical, especially for our communities of concern, which, as you pointed out, really have a lower rate of having perhaps hardwired. But I did, and more towards a comment, had read something where households may not have a wired connection, but will have internet access through their smartphone. And kind of along that same lines, I'm just wondering, you certainly understand the importance of having a backbone fiber network, especially at a jurisdictional and a governmental perspective, but more towards reaching out towards households. Are you also looking at changes of technology? So for instance, like looking at in the future of like what SpaceX is doing with Starlink and the idea of using direct satellite internet access, especially as those costs get cheaper, rather than looking at more of an expensive dig operation of laying down more fiber And right now, even in the South Bay, there's a small internet provider, Jelly, which provides point of sight, like you can get a small antenna and put it on your roof and get high band internet access, which is probably preferable, especially in areas where you don't have the high broadband cable access right now. So I'm just wondering, kind of looking at lower cost solutions for rolling this out perhaps quicker and maybe more of a long-term towards trenching and actually creating that more broadband fiber network.
Yeah,
So question and a
absolutely.
comment.
Absolutely. I really focus on fixed broadband service today, but we did acquire some speed test data. And that really showed us that while there's a lot of advancements being made with satellite and 5G technologies, that technology just isn't there today to support the kind of demands that a modern household needs. But we are keeping a pulse on all of the wireless and new technologies that are ramping up. And are looking for partnerships with any of those various companies to deploy broadband more expeditiously and more rapidly, especially as we know that the state and federal funding is going to be looking at various, technologies of transmission to ensure that underserved and unserved populations are met.
Thank you. Any questions from any other members of the working group? Not seeing any hands or anybody turning on a microphone. So with that, just want to say thank you and appreciate the report. And if anybody has questions, please go ahead and email Crystal directly. Moving on to item number 5, which is an update on the Housing Acceleration Program grant funding. And Tulare is going to be providing our presentation from Sandag. Tulare.
Thanks, Tate. Hi, everyone. So I wanted to take an opportunity to come to the TWIG and just kind of give you an update. I did give this same presentation to Regional Planning Committee last Friday. So if you were able to join that, it's the exact same presentation, but I thought I'd make sure that everyone had the same information and understood where we're at with the Housing Acceleration Program and the grants that we put forward. So you can go to the next slide. Perfect. Okay, so just as a reminder, I've talked to you a lot and staff here at Sandag has talked to you a lot about where the funding is coming from for these grant programs and all of the work that we're doing as part of the Housing Acceleration Program. I think many of you are familiar with it, but it's Assembly Bill 101. This was a one-time grant funding opportunity that came to Sandag. This was an Assembly Bill that happened in 2019. And really the purpose of that funding was to help our region as a whole to be able to accelerate housing production and to meet the RENA goals and all of the things that you're trying to achieve in your housing elements. And so what Sandag has done with that REAP funding is we've taken some of that and we suballocated it through the Housing Acceleration Program grants. We're doing a couple of other things. I think some of the staff from the various cities are participating in some of our education and outreach engagement opportunities that we put forward. The Housing Policy Leadership Academy is one that currently kicked off yesterday and having housing forums. So there's an education outreach component to what we're doing with the work. And then there is also technical resources that Sandag is looking to putting in place to really help our region as a whole for housing acceleration. So next slide. So I just have this slide here just as a reminder to what we made available through when we released the call for projects. We brought to you the criteria that we were thinking about, and we took that to Regional Planning Committee as well as to the board before we released it. But just a quick reminder, we made available $3 million for the Housing Acceleration Grant Program. That was done at the exact same time that we released an additional $3 million for our Smart Growth Incentive Program. I'm not talking specifically about Smart Growth and the awards for that today, but just to let you know, we did release those both at the same time. For the housing grant program, though, we allowed a minimum award of $125,000, a maximum of $500,000. We didn't require a match, but if anyone did have a match, there were points that were awarded based on that. And then really in terms of the types of projects that were eligible under this program, it really just needed to be focused on housing. So things like ADU ordinances, density bonus. We even allowed for the opportunity for those jurisdictions who needed it to have staff augmentation. And so there was a long range of funding and I'm sorry, not funding, project examples that were included in the call for projects. And the thing that's very unique about this particular grant program compared to what you might see with our smart growth or other programs that we release through SANDAG, because this money does come from the state and there was an expenditure deadline within the legislative language, we have to expend all of our funds by June 30th of 2023. And that's something that is going to be reflected in all of the grant agreements. Next slide. So in terms of just timeline, just to take a step back and where we were kind of started with this process and where we are right now. You know, we did come to you in October, I believe, to talk about the program, the evaluation. And then in November, we took that to our regional planning committee as well as the board of directors, asking for the approval to release the call for projects. Immediately after we got their approval on the 19th, we did release that call for projects for the housing program. We held a workshop in December to answer questions. We did this jointly with the Smart Growth Incentive Program, but really just to answer questions and hopefully generate, you know, excitement around the funding opportunity, but to make sure that it was clear what the ask was. And then the deadline for this one was in January. It was January 21st. We had a quicker turnaround because of the expenditure deadline. And then we did the review and evaluations in February, bringing us to where we are now in March, having sought and received approval for recommendation from Regional Planning Committee. And tomorrow we'll be going to the board for full approval of our recommendations and to be able to execute the grant agreements. Next slide. So this map here just shows the jurisdictions that we're recommending for a full award. We did receive 8 applications. And out of the 8 applications we received, we're recommending 7 of them for full award. And the one city that we were not able to recommend under this particular program for a full award was for the city of Escondido. The actual application and what they need the funds for is something that we worked out with HCD, but they determined it was an ineligible project under the funding source. However, after our grants team, who is absolutely fabulous, they looked at it more closely. They have followed up with staff and they're actually moving their recommendation to move that project over into the Smart Growth Incentive Program. When we released both calls for projects, we did indicate that if we thought an application was more suitable for one or the other, that staff would take the liberty to move the application to the other program. And so that's what we're doing for Escondido, which is why we're only recommending 7 for full award here. And then the next slide just gives you an overview of the different cities that and the county who is receiving funding, their project description, again, very housing focused projects, the award amount that they sought and that they will be receiving. And it totals up to approximately $1.9 million in application requests that we're recommending to the board for full approval. So next slide, in terms of just next steps, we're going to be going to the board tomorrow. All of the projects that you saw listed on the prior slide, we're recommending for full award. We'll come back and let you know about the Smart Growth Incentive Program. That'll be its own separate schedule and go to the board as a separate item. But we fully anticipate that this would be approved tomorrow and we will be executing grant agreements very shortly thereafter. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Any questions, comments from anybody on the working group? Not seeing any. Allison, are there any members of the public that would like to make a comment?
I do not see any hands raised.
All right. Well, thank you, Larry. We're looking forward to working with you on implementing those grants. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. With that, we'll move on to our next item, number 6, which is the SANDAG Working Group restructuring. Allison from SANDAG is going to be giving us a presentation on that.
Thanks, Tate. And I'm actually going to invite Keith Greer to kick off this presentation. We'll be presenting jointly.
So Tate, I'll start off. Good afternoon, everyone. You may recall that I spoke to you at your January 13th meeting with regards to restructuring SANDAG's working groups that are occurring. So today we wanted to present you with an update on this effort and talk about the new Sustainable Communities Working Group that was being set up. So as I already mentioned, I'll be doing the first half of the presentation and she'll finish it up. So that's at February 11th meeting, the executive committee approved the restructuring of the working groups to better align to the agency's current priorities and provide for more meaningful discussions amongst the working group members. So the restructuring, why was it done? So the restructuring of the working groups was a recommendation that came out of a plan that SANDAG did back in 2019 to look at organizational effectiveness. And you may be asking why this recommendation to look at working groups. SANDAG has 23 working groups right now, and each one requires about 40 hours of staff time to have a meeting and costs over $1 million a year for SANDAG to actually implement. Some of these working groups are been struggling with quorum. Some are no longer aligned with the agency's current goals. And as such, this time is ripe to do an assessment of the working groups and to maximize their effectiveness. So we looked over 2000, let's go back 2000. Over 2021, we've looked at the 23 working groups. We spoke to the working group liaison, SANDAG staff. We surveyed some of the working group members, looked at other working groups that our peer agencies actually have. And from this body of work, some common themes emerged. First, while many of the working groups are set up for specific purposes or projects, many have not evolved as agencies' need has evolved. As a result, some of these working groups' charters are outdated, inconsistent, or just need to be completely updated. The working groups and the members actually have commented that there's been a declining participation in some of the working groups and inability in some cases to meet actually quorum. There's also been frequent cancellations due to lack of meaningful agenda items, overlapping agenda items from one working group to another, and inconsistency amongst the working group functions. So returning to our peer agencies, we looked at 27 peer agencies throughout the region. We found that, in the US that is, generally there's been a trend to streamline the working group processes or committee processes. There's been a move towards having multiple disciplinary members, so you have a broad, diverse representation. And what I thought was very unique is many of them have annual work plans for the working groups to set up and make sure that they have meaningful agenda items and the working group knows where they're headed throughout the year. So based on all this information, we developed a series of recommendations and brought to our executive committee, and they approved those as such. So next slide. So first we said there needs to be a standard nomenclature with clear roles and responsibility. So SANDAG right now has subcommittees and committees and technical advisory committees and working groups and ad hoc committees, a whole bunch of different things to generalize our groups themselves. So just for this purposes today, what we said there should be a standard structure, board of directors at the top, that's the highest decision-making body at SANDAG. Sometimes the board of directors has their own subcommittees, and they, such as the litter abatement to the housing subcommittees. And those are where board members want to meet on a topical area. We have 6 policy advisory committees that are set up by state law. For example, transportation committee is one of the PACs as we call them. The regional planning committee is another PAC. And that's the PAC that this group actually reports to. Underneath the PACs and reporting to the PACs themselves are working groups. These are Brown Act groups that vote on the recommendations and support staff and the PACs with decision making. So you're familiar with this. This is what your current group is. And this is, we'll talk about the Sustainable Communities Working Group, which will replace this group in a second. There are cases, though, we need to have technical task forces developed. And those either are around a certain project, for example, the Bayshore Bikeways example, a specific project could use a technical task force, or a forum around a specific topical area, such as good movements or shoreline preservation. So this spring, we'll be looking at all the working groups that got eliminated and which ones we think need to have technical task force set up either for a project or for a topic. And I know Brandon Reed, if you're on from the Airport Authority, I know he was asking about the energy working group. That's one where our staff is currently thinking about a technical task force around the climate/energy theme. The key distinction here is working groups report to the PACs and vote on their decisions. Technical task force are technical input to staff, and they are formed as needed. Next slide. So the working groups, as they look now, we would take the working groups from 23 to 11. That includes both 9 existing working groups that remain, such as the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council. That's an existing working group we maintained, and we're setting up 2 new working groups. One of the working groups is Mobility Working Group, which will report directly to Transportation Committee and will help support the Transportation Committee with decisions around the regional plan's implementation of the transportation network. The other one is the Sustainable Communities Strategy Working Group, or SCS Working Group. And this will report directly to the Regional Planning Committee. And that's the one where today we're talking about what that looks like and moves on to. So the other ones, we eliminated some obsolete working groups, consolidated other working groups, and established some new technical task forces that will be coming out in springtime. So let's talk about the Sustainable Communities Working Group. I think we presented that idea in the January meeting. We'll get some more detail here. In your report, there's the charter itself, and I'll kind of give you a high-level overview of it. So again, the new Sustainable Communities Working Group will make recommendations on programs and policies covered in the Sustainable Communities Strategy of the Sandag's Regional Plan. So it's items dealing with housing, the environment, climate, land use, things that you're typically used to seeing in this group. Membership will include one voting member and one alternate from each of the cities and the county. So it's very similar to what you're seeing here. Non-voting members will include representations from Caltrans, MTS, North County Transit, Airport Authority, County Water Authority, Port of San Diego, et cetera, which is also mirrors your current working group. The two important changes and updates I think you'll find as part of this charter is the first, that the City Communities Working Group will be chaired by a member of the RPC that will be selected by the current RPC chair, Mary Salas. And what that does is that member will be a non-voting member, but does two things. One is it allows the member of the Regional Planning Committee, the body which you make recommendations to actually hear the discussion that's around any of these policy and project issues. So they're not only educating the members, which then can pass along to the Regional Planning Committee itself, but it's also allowing you a direct connection to the PAC. The second item, something Allison will talk about in a second, is annual work programs. We're taking a lesson from our review of the other regional planning agencies throughout the nation and developing annual work programs, which will be developed with the working group itself, to make sure the members have a year look ahead of what's going to be discussed, to make sure there's meaningful agenda items and you kind of know where Sandag's heading towards. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Allison, and I'll be at the end. I can answer any questions with this. Allison?
Thank you, Keith. So we've been starting to put together some ideas for the draft work plan items for the Sustainable Communities Working Group. So we have some items here on the screen. I want to give you a sense for the types of topics and programs and work efforts at Sandag that we imagine going through this working group over the next year. So under housing and land use, we see a strong focus on our REAP 2.0 program and really developing how we will spend the funds that we're anticipating from the state, including another call for projects with opportunity for capital projects to be funded through that program. So that's one major effort. Another is mobility hub planning, more in general. And then also some specific Sandag projects like our connecting transit to the airport and San Ysidro mobility hub planning. So we could imagine some of those specific projects coming through the Sustainable Communities Working Group for you all to offer input or to just stay informed about those projects. On the climate side, there's a regional adaptation framework that's getting underway at Sandag. There's also a number of state funding opportunities coming available this year through the state budget. So we want to make sure that we can use this forum to keep everyone informed about opportunities that are available to Sandag or to member agencies. And then electric vehicle programs as well. Now we do see electric vehicle programs also going to the mobility working group. We feel like in the context of climate and reducing GHG emissions, it's still important to talk about our EV programs with sustainable communities. And then finally, on the habitat conservation and land management side, we imagine bringing forward updates on the EMP, Environmental Mitigation Program. And then also recently we're finalizing a report around our carbon storage and sequestration study. So again, we feel like this relates to regional climate planning work that's underway as well as land management activities. So it should just kind of give you a sense for some of the topics that we imagine bringing forward. So our next steps over the next couple months, what to expect. In April, we will be sending a request to city managers for both to identify members for both the Sustainable Communities Working Group and the Mobility Working Group. So we'll keep you informed when that request goes out. We would imagine many of you would be on the Sustainable Communities Working Group, but again, based on those topics, we're leaving that up to each jurisdiction to identify who the appropriate staff person is and an alternate so that you can, adjust based on the topics who's the most appropriate person to attend. And also in April, we'll be asking our policy committee chairs to identify those working group chairs for each group. And then we're planning to host the first meeting of the Sustainable Communities Working Group, ideally in May. So we would have the work plan pretty well fleshed out by then and allow that group to own that work plan at their first meeting. And then the charter for Sustainable Communities Working Group identifies bi-monthly meetings. And we're hoping that with the work plan and bi-monthly meetings, we can really plan out some themed meetings throughout the year so that you all kind of know who to have ready to attend those meetings as well. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to leave up this slide for a little discussion from the group. We can ask any questions about the Sustainable Communities Working Group, but also wanted to get input from the TWIG on two key questions here. So the first is around technical task forces. We've identified the need for at least 3 on the areas that you see on the screen: our energy and climate action planning work, shoreline, and EMP in more focused setting. So we want to hear if there are others that you feel like would be valuable to convene. And then the other thing I wanted to get input on is just from TWIG members in general, if there are other ways that we can continue to work with you to facilitate information sharing and collaboration. I don't want to, lose any of the value that you get out of the TWIG meeting as we transition to the Sustainable Communities Working Group meeting. So if there are other ways that we can continue to support you all, whether it's more informal kind of calls among planning directors, sub-regional meetings. We've done sub-regional meetings in the past, kind of focused on climate. If there's a need to do some meetings like that, more on housing or land use focused topics, we could do that. Also, there's an opportunity to continue our email communications, or if a listserv, something like that would be helpful to TWIG members, again, to just beyond working group items, if there are ways that we can continue to support you all in a more information sharing and collaboration role. So with that, I'll turn it back to Tate to facilitate any discussion on this item.
Well, thank you very much, Allison and Keith, for that informative presentation. So just, I guess, a question or a comment that I'm making here, just looking at this, and I'll turn it over to others, is it seems like from the name of the group and from the technical task forces, this is truly more of a sustainability focused effort rather than more of a regional planning focus. Is that correct?
Well, maybe Nikki, if you wouldn't mind going back to the work plan slide, there's definitely a large environmental component. We do see housing and land use as one kind of work plan area as well. But this is where I feel like there may be a need for other ways to coordinate with planning directors on more focused or technical discussions. So, it would be good to get some input on that, from you, Tate, or others, if there's other topics that you all like coming together to talk about as planning directors that aren't covered here, that we can still facilitate in another way, whether it's through a task force or other way to convene the group.
Yeah, I think that's the idea here, is to work out that draft work plan with the working group themselves. So it's a back and forth iteration to say what's important for the region to move forward with in terms of discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering that. Are there any, hopefully there'll be some questions or comments from members. either want to raise your hand or unmute yourself, please feel free to do that. Dave, City Poway.
Hi, camera. Hey, everyone. Dave DeVries, City Planner, City of Poway. The only thing that makes me nervous about this is now we don't have one meeting where the planning managers can really collaborate on a variety of topics. And I think what I would see happening is if Twig goes away, the planners of the region would end up meeting at a different venue, that's outside of Sandag. So, I do think there's value here in having all of the planners meet together at one meeting on a variety of topics.
Yeah, I was sharing with Tueri and Allison that way back 15 plus years ago, all the planning directors used to get together for lunch once a month. And I was explaining, oh yeah, and that kind of evolved under Bob Leiter into this Twig, which now we're looking at the whole purpose of implementation of a regional plan and what's needed. And that's what you're seeing before you. I think there are some topics that maybe the planning directors and city planners should put on this list for the work plan as it's discussed throughout the year.
Jennifer, City of Encinitas.
There it goes. I'm in agreement with Dave. I found this group because I came from Orange County to be very helpful for discussion purposes on the variety of topics that we deal with all the time, because we are involved with all the things that you've listed with this new group. The one thing that I don't feel like has enough emphasis, I guess, would be obviously housing. And I don't feel like Sandag puts enough emphasis in housing and providing enough information on housing compared to some of the other regional planning groups. And so that would be one of the things that I would say that we would need more collaboration regionally, as well as sharing best practices and the tools. I mean, it's been very helpful with Nikki putting out, information in regards to SB9. But I feel like there's so much going on at the state level that, it's filtering through, but it's not filtering through fast enough to local government sometimes and some of these new laws. But that would be my comment.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because that reminds me another thing we wanted to mention, beyond the grant program that's been funded with the REAP 1.0 funding, we have other regional initiatives and technical assistance, local government resources that we need to get out to you guys. Quite frankly, we're getting more of those up and running. And so that's something that myself and Sam Solis, who's on here, will be reaching out to each of the jurisdictions to meet with you one-on-one to talk about those resources and how we can best tailor them to the jurisdictions in our region. But in part of that conversation is getting at exactly what you're saying, Jennifer, like how can we best facilitate those conversations to get you the resources you need on housing in particular. And so, it could be that we have a housing focused task force, although if it's the same people on both the Sustainable Communities Working Group and a housing task force that's made up of planning directors, that could be problematic, but.
Any other questions or comments from members of the working group? Well, I'll go ahead and just make another comment. I certainly understand the connection. I mean, obviously, as we move forward and everything we have to do in terms of climate and reducing GHG, obviously that's connected to how we plan our housing, how we plan for jobs, coordinate the land uses, and so that they're in line with that. I just would echo the issue of housing and land use. I just feel like some of that is getting lost, and I'm concerned that that's kind of getting overlooked in kind of the iteration of the three just by the name of the group itself. I don't know, I wish there was a little bit more thought or a little bit more of an option that we did have to really discuss this before it went to the board. Because I do think, you know, I've been on various SANDAG working groups and committees, and I certainly acknowledge and understand the points that Keith, you made. Although I do think, you know, my experience with the technical working group recently and, you know, in the past 15 or so years that I've been involved with it, it has been well attended and there has been a lot of good discussion. So I would hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. I do think this group does have values, and while there certainly was opportunity to improve every group, I don't want to necessarily blow it up. And that's what I am concerned, that it's too many death by 1,000 little cuts, that you will start siloing things and we may not get as much participation by being trying to be too many different things. With that, I'll leave that as just my comment, and unless anybody else from the working group has anything else that they would like to add, just wait a second just to look on the list, see if I see anybody unmuting themselves or hands. All right, seeing none, do we have any members of the public that would like to make a public comment on this item?
Don't see any members of the public wishing to speak.
All right, and just I guess one final question, just so I understand. The Sustainable Working Group is going to be chaired by a member of the board?
A member of the Regional Planning Committee, which is also then a member of the board.
Okay, great, thank you. And then, so you're going to be doing a call out to jurisdictions to have a sitting member and then an alternate member?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we'll expect to be getting an email, and who is that going to be going to, just in terms of organizationally? To the existing members, or are you going to be reaching out to city managers, so forth?
Our plan was city managers, but we'll keep, you know, all the TWIG members a part of that request as well. So you should receive it too.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you again. I appreciate your report, Keith, Allison, and more information on that, I assume, is going to be coming up, and looking forward to that. Let's see, moving on to our next item, which is upcoming meetings. On this one, just before we get started, one of the things I did want to just bring up for everybody's consideration, as SANDAG is moving forward, looking in terms of, as most jurisdictions are, will be more to in-person meetings. And while we may not have many future meetings coming up, but I did want to ask the question, until the restructuring, how do people feel about our current format in terms of meeting virtually through Zoom, or would folks like to start meeting in person again? And any thoughts on that to help staff in terms of decisions and what we want to do for our next meeting or two? Any thoughts that members of the working group may have on that? Does everybody generally like meeting on Zoom and not having to drive downtown to go to SANDAG's office?
Hey, this is Rob Eford from County of San Diego. Yeah, I definitely think, as far as availability to meet, holding it virtually increases accessibility, and also is just a better use of time overall, not having to have the transit time to be in person.
Hi, Mary Balderama speaking from Oceanside, and I second that notion.
Yeah, Adam Feinstone from Escondido, and think just like us coming from North County and Oceanside, et cetera, would definitely prefer to just do it virtually.
Thank you. And I see Martin says yes, he agrees. Thank you. Well, I think that's kind of the consensus. I agree for also the saving our environment, not having to get in our cars for those who can't take transit. I think it's good for the environment, and I don't think this meeting is typically one that's generally attended by the public, and I think it does provide a greater accessibility for the public also to attend virtually. So it would be my recommendation that we continue meeting virtually unless we're directed otherwise by the board. But given the fact that there will be restructuring coming up, it also still probably makes sense for our next few meetings to continue to meet online. So hopefully that helps staff in terms of planning out our next meetings. Are there any are there members of the working group that have any suggested topics for next meetings that they would like to hear or take action on? One of the things I would like, and obviously it's probably something we're going to be putting on the agenda anyway, but to probably hear a little bit on the smart growth incentive program, both the current round and future rounds. Likewise, just to report out on SB 9, SB 10, if there's any other updates regarding that in terms of jurisdictions. Dave, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Dave DeVries, City Planner in City of Poway. I'm hearing mixed things on these HCD guidelines coming out with HCD. So just to reiterate what you were saying, Tate, it'd be nice to kind of get an update from HCD on what's happening with these guidelines.
Right.
You know, we're trying to prep an ordinance, and it'd be helpful to get kind of their opinion on this.
Agreed. Good comment. Anybody else? Well, if you certainly think of anything coming up between now and the next meeting, feel free to go ahead and send Allison an email with your ideas. Certainly want to make sure that this is the best use of everybody's time. And if there's anything folks would like to perhaps take a deeper dive on or focus, we can certainly do that. So let Allison know. Happy for any and all suggestions that you may have that might be helpful. Great. Before I close out the meeting, Allison, is there anything, or staff, is there anything that you would like to address before we adjourn?
No, I think we're good. I will just reiterate, that we do want to meet with each of you to better understand some of your needs and how we can align our resources from the REAP 1.0 program with that. So be watching for some communication on that in the coming weeks. And then, and more communication on the working group as well.
Great. Well, again, I want to thank Sandag staff for another round of excellent presentations. Thank you to Larry and the team also on the grants. I know that's a hard work and a lot of effort is put into that. We certainly appreciate that. So, and thank you everybody for participating today to make sure, like we always do, we have a quorum, and look forward to everybody's thoughts and involvement, especially as we look to restructure this working group. So with that, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting for today. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.